what are some of the traits of Silicon Valley? Is it helping other entrepreneurs without really expecting anything in return? Is it sharing your ideas without fear of your ideas being stolen? Is it passion? Is it a culture of fundraising? And what is it? Is it exploitation? And so let's talk about that. I'll leave that open. Del, why don't you start?
I think it's a combination, and I think it really depends on your product and what you're trying to do. It can be a combination of those things, and what I find interesting, I've been in San Francisco since I was 8 years old, and I've seen how this industry has grown up around me, essentially. The thing that I think is the most different, that differentiates Silicon Valley and differentiates the tech space in general, is this idea of cooperation, because it takes a lot of folks and it takes a lot of time to be able to build something, and it can't just be one person doing it. So unlike other businesses where it is just you have to be open to sharing ideas, and you have to be open to finding new tools, new avenues, and having a conversation around that. And I think culturally that's not a place that we naturally come from. You know, people are very hesitant. Like my father, I love my father dearly. Just had a conversation with 2 days ago, and the first thing he asked me was like, how easy is it to hack your code? And I was like, what? He's like, so you're coming out with this thing, and you know, are people gonna be able to steal it? And I was like, anybody who can steal it can actually build it themselves, and they're not gonna take the time to hack it in any way, shape, or form. So that is still foremost on his mind, of somehow I'm gonna get jacked by someone. And I think that's a very cultural trait. My family's originally from Colombia, so I just feel like it's very ingrained in all my conversations. And Silicon Valley is completely the difference, where it's you'll go and somebody will tell you all this information really easily, and you're like, wow, I can't believe they're being so open. And so I think like that's been a difficult spot for me, because I don't come from people that generally share that way.
Pablo, what do you think? And then Laura, we'll turn it over to Miami, and if there's a difference in Miami and Latin America, that.
Well, sure. I mean, I agree that there's a culture of sharing ideas, and I mean, I mentor a lot of folks, minorities and women that want to start companies, and one of the big, when people come from outside of Silicon Valley, you know, I can't tell you an idea, or they God forbid, they ask you to sign some kind of NDA, which is nobody in Silicon Valley signs NDAs, not for ideas, at least. If you have a very developed company and you're maybe going to do a partnership, maybe, but you know, initially when all you have is the back of a napkin, that nobody will sign anything. So yeah, there's a culture of, the bottom line is, what I tell people is, you go to the top of the mountain and you scream your idea. Most likely people are going to say, like, who's the idiot at the top of the mountain? They're not going to be like, oh, I mean, that's a great idea, I'm going to go do it myself. You're much more likely to find help and other people who are, you know, empathize with your cause, or who might know, like, oh, I just saw another person scream at the top of the mountain, you know, 2 miles away, and they kind of sound like you, and so you guys should be co-founders. And that kind of stuff happens a lot more than anybody stealing your idea.
You know, last night several of us heard speaker Paul Singh talk about idea versus data. And he said, look, if, you know, ideas are fine, but if you don't have the data, if an entrepreneur is not squarely focused on who the customer is, really focused, then forget the idea. Since we're on that idea of ideas, what do you guys think about that? Of really, do you have to do both in terms of really knowing your data in order to get funded, in order to get investors? Do you want to talk about that?
I think Paul's point yesterday was that, I mean, if you look at 10 years ago, well, not even 10, 15 years ago, you could show up to Sand Hill Road with a deck, an idea, and people would give you $5 million to test it out, but that implied getting like closets full of servers and you know, like actually like a rack, you know, full of appliances and servers. Now you just turn on an instance of AWS and you're up and running. So I think what his point was, like, you have to, like, the time of funding just ideas is long gone, and you have to have traction, you have to have a real product and something that's real, because otherwise you won't, basically won't get any credibility.
And to add to that,
Sure.
there's this whole concept of the lean startup, and really before diving into investing a lot of money in producing a product, you want to know if the market exists and who the customer's going to be, and interview, say, 100 people to understand the need of the market before you actually go develop $1 million product.
So, Reese, do you want to, and let's segue, once if you want to comment on that, but also segue the difference between a Miami and the type of environment versus Silicon Valley.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the data and the business plan. They both have to go together. But I really wanted to get back to the question on, why Silicon Valley different from other cities. And at Endeavor, we believe that we can build entrepreneurial ecosystems. In fact, Endeavor has a proven track record of building entrepreneurial ecosystems around the world. And somebody last night mentioned Fernando Fabre's TEDx Miami talk on how to build an entrepreneurial mafia. And he mentions that, he uses as examples the Fairchild Mafia in Silicon Valley and obviously the PayPal Mafia. So what is this, right? These are founders whose definition of success is different, right? It's not only about the amount of money they got, but it's about their level of influence. So what happens is that, founders, as they become successful and they have, successful exits, they reinvest in their community. People that work with them go out and found other companies, and that's what we think makes the difference. To prove that point, Endeavor has done different studies in Argentina, Jordan, Turkey, in the tech industry, and the same things are happening, right? So by interviewing entrepreneurs on their level of influence, who were their mentors, who inspired them, who invested in them, you can see that, and you can almost track the whole industry to a few, 4 or 5 initial ones that were really successful and really reinvested in others. So I think that's the Silicon Valley effect. I think Miami and other entrepreneurial hubs have their uniqueness. I don't think we want to replicate necessarily, or we can't replicate exactly what's happening there. But we do think that it all starts with stories of success. And stories of success means that startups have to really grow and become scalable so that they can produce a successful exit or IPO, and that's how the wealth comes back to the community with that commitment.
Well, let's talk about that idea of community. Last night, Paul, you said, look, this is idea of community, but it really has to be done as successful businesses. So get successful business and the community will come. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. What do you think about that? I think some people disagree. And developing that ecosystem of entrepreneurial ecosystem, what do you think about that?
So I think that I think we were agreeing. I think that what was different was the definition of community. So when I think, or I talk about entrepreneurial ecosystem, I'm thinking of these entrepreneurs becoming successful, having successful exits, and investing in others. And then those entrepreneurs, to become successful, need the support from other people, other stakeholders in the community, which are mentors and investors. Mentorship is really key advice, and then also, access to capital, obviously, and talent. So, that can be defined as community too, right? But we're thinking, he was saying building companies is different than building a community. I'm thinking, the ecosystem needs the community in the sense of mentors, investors, talent. And then, if you want to also bring in other collaborators, like city builders and government, etc. I mean, that's where I think we agree that it all starts with building the company, that you need the support.
Ideas can come from anywhere. Carlos, I've read that you developed your idea for your live messaging company in line at a movie theater here in Miami, waiting for your daughter, you wanted her to text you what bubble gum to get you. Was it watermelon or something else? That idea came from anywhere. Let's talk about this idea in terms of an environment and where ideas can come from.
Well, I mean, everybody always thinks of ideas, I believe, because I think of ideas every day. I look at things and see the things that don't work well. I say, well, that could be done so much better. whether it's business, even if it's at a McDonald's or anything where you're going, you're always seeing something you can apply. You just got to find something you have a passion for, something you want to stick with. And you say, you know what, this is it. So sharing your idea, it was a great point you said earlier. We're so worried about it in Miami. Our culture is to hold everything in because we think one of the other, Latinos around us or somebody around us is going to steal our idea and run with it. You got to have the passion. You got to have the drive for it. You got to want to stick with it and run with it. I can tell you my idea. You might not like my idea, but I'm going to keep going with it. I don't care if you don't like it. I believe it. I've already validated it. One of the things you spoke about earlier, the word is validate. Is go with your idea, talk to people, show them, ask them. I literally have asked hundreds of people. Hey, I got this app I'm working, I got this idea. Before it even was an idea, I've got this app, it's actually not even out, and I've probably interviewed about 300 people. And I've asked them, hey, would you use this thing? And I see them as they're texting, hey, can I ask you a question? And I'll ask anybody, I don't care who you are, where you are, I'll be very polite. And I'll ask you for ideas. One of the problems that we talked about earlier is cooperation, in Silicon Valley, which is something beautiful. It doesn't happen here in Miami, unfortunately. In my experience, I've literally gone to some of these work shared spaces that are very great, very nice what they've done there. They're beautiful spaces, but I've gone in there asking for help, and they literally turned their back on me, unfortunately. So I had to do it on my own. I literally have had a lot of roadblocks, but there's a lot of opportunity though.
Can I just add
Yeah.
this idea that I've been playing around for a year, which is like culture is malleable. Like this idea that a culture is set in stone is a really faulty assumption on our part. My great-grandparents' Colombia is very different from my cousin's Colombia. Like, there's no way. Is there a line? Yes, but can I be a culture change maker? Of course I can be a culture change maker. And I think, like, you being open to having conversations with people here in Miami is gonna open and change things in a very, you've created a stakehold in that idea. And I think that that's gonna make things change and open up because you have a vested interest in that. So it's not just having the passion, but it's actually having the stamina to come along with it. And I wouldn't say I had an issue with what Paul said, but we're creating Avion, which is a pre-accelerator for Latinas in the mobile space, and I'm working with Francesca, who's here from Innovation Labs, to actually create a pipeline of Latinas who want to work in the tech space, but don't know how to go about it and have a great idea. And I have to say, like, part of the reason we're creating this is that being in a panel like this, I would always get asked by a whole bunch of women who come up to me afterwards and be like, oh my God, how did you do it? And I love talking, so it was always great to meet other women and to champion them. And just like Michelle championed me, who's here. And that's why I've created this space, because I think we come from a culture where having that interaction is hugely important. And so while Silicon Valley has a lot of lessons to teach us, I think that we have a lot of lessons to teach Silicon Valley. And the reality is that our numbers bear that. I mean, when California 3 weeks ago became a majority Latino state and everybody was like, oh, sorpresa, I was like, I've been waiting for that for 10 years, So a lot of people in Silicon Valley don't know how to go about marketing to us, don't know how to go about having conversations with us, and yet realize that we are a hugely important demographic, and that conversation has to happen on a par that I'm really excited to be a part of. Like, it can't just be like, we want to sell you stuff. We actually have to be proactive creators in that.
Well, on that, we were talking, Giovanni, at breakfast, we were talking about, and Doug also read an article, there are Latino Startup Alliance, there's Hispanic Net, there's Silicon Valley Leadership Summit, there's several of them, and I asked, are there too many of these type of organizations? And Delta, your answer was a resounding
Absolutely
no.
not, because I mean, I live in a bubble, and it's called Silicon Valley in San Francisco, but it's definitely a bubble. You go down to, Salinas, for example, majority Latino population. You go to some other places like that, and the conversations and the ecosystems are really small, and they're fantastic, and the people that are working with them are fantastic. But there's definitely this sense of like there's a barrier and I don't know how to have access or entry. And that relationship building, which has to happen, is where someplace like Latino Startup Alliance can be in. And so it can't just be all on us. It's better if it's very spread out, because you know, if I have one more person coming from out of town say to me, like, the only way I'm gonna make my dream come true is if I move to San Francisco, I'm like, we have plenty of people. We actually need you to be successful where you're at. And if that means that you need the right introductions to people, fantastic. But the reality is that as an ecosystem, those spots are becoming less and less, and you need to be able to find people within your own ecosystem for you to be
Well,
successful.
what you also said was that when you look down the list, when
Yeah.
you look at women's organizations
Oh,
in
it's-
Silicon Valley, 150.
Yeah.
African American, 100.
Yeah.
I'm using, there's Latino or
There's
support
5 of
type
us.
of groups, 5 or 6. So the answer was a resounding no. I wanted to, talk with this session is about lessons. Pablo, last night you were talking about mistakes. You made some doozies, you said. I mean, you were a Stanford, UCLA undergrad, Stanford Business School. You said you made some big mistakes. And how'd you come out of it? What'd you learn from it? I think that what people would like to know.
Well, I've made every mistake in the book and written some new books.
And is culture, is it in the, our culture, is that something, failure and mistakes, is something is is outside of our culture?
No, that's actually a huge difference. I mean, I grew up in Chile and moved here when I was in high school. And in Chile, it's very much viewed, people get labeled as failures if you fail. In Silicon Valley, it's actually quite the opposite. If you fail for any reason that's not an ethical shortcoming, people will give you more money and more opportunities because of all the things that you've learned and done. So I went, like you said, I went from Stanford Business School and working in a hedge fund to being homeless and living out of the back of my car because we had to we're running out of money and we had to let go of most of the people in the company. And basically we went from 15 to 2 people and rescued the company from nothing. I wrote a blog post called The 7 Dirty Gritty Lessons that cost me $2 million about a lot of the very specific product mistakes that we made. Oh, you can't hear, sorry. About the very specific product mistakes that we made. And that probably exceeds the scope of this immediate conversation. But it's at the end of the day, the reality is that you have to. Entrepreneurship is a contact sport, and you can't. It's not something that you can really study and become good at. It's not like chemistry or physics or English literature. What I tell people is that if you put on pads and play offensive line for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you get together with your friends to eat nachos and drink beer on a Monday night, they're both technically called football. But it's a little different when you're getting flattened by the opposing defensive end. You can make all the comments you want while you're chowing down the nachos. You should have done that. But when you're actually getting slammed, it's pretty different. And at the end of the day, you just got to go do it. And eventually, the number one attribute I've only been an entrepreneur for 4.5 years, but the number one attribute that I've seen of people that succeed is just the fact that you get knocked down 10 times and you get up 11. And that's really it. You just really keep, as long as you don't make the same mistakes and you just switch a little bit and hit yourself against a different spot on the wall, and then eventually figure out where the door is, that's the number one thing. And I think what the press and people who study startups from the outside often kind of fail to mention is a lot, everything. Ben Horowitz is actually he's my biggest investor, Andreessen Horowitz, and Ben Horowitz talks about the struggle, and about every single company that you see that's been successful has been through these near-death periods. The Zuckerbergs of the world, the Bill Gates of the world, all these people that basically get glorified in the media, all had really horrifying near-death experiences as companies, and it also affects their personal lives and everything. But people don't talk about that. People only talk about the successes, and then obviously there's the kind of statistical failure. 98% or 95% of companies fail, whatever it is, right? And then that becomes this number, and then there's but these people, they're special. And at the end of the day, a huge part of it has to do with not giving up, because it's super easy when you're getting beat up and you used to make money and you no longer make money, and all of a sudden you only clothes on the back of your car to say I shouldn't do this anymore. That's most certainly the path of least resistance.
That's good, thank you. And is there a barrier to Latinos in Silicon Valley or in general in business, but really this is about technology and tech in Silicon Valley. Is there a barrier? Daldell, I asked you last night.
So, you'll-
Here, you know,
Go
go for it.
ahead. No, if you want.
Go Giovanni and then I'll.
I just think that the barrier is lack of people that connect with you. Building the community is, if you don't have that ecosystem, then you don't know where to turn, and it's the whole loneliness syndrome. You're in a big city with a lot of people, yet you still feel alone. Less than 1% of the funding goes to less than 1% of the funding are for Latinos, so it's not enough of us helping each other out. So that I would think would be the biggest barrier.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly right. You need more people. That's the reason I flew across the country to be here. Is because you need to have people that other people say like, I got kind of, has the same name as me, speaks the same language from the same culture as I do, and they're doing this. Like, why not me? And that's something that, it's, instead of why me, the question should be why not me? And I think it's slowly changing to that, but there's still a lot of like, why me? And that's what we're kind of like grinding to change.
I think that there's two separate issues. One, how you see yourself, and number two, how people see you. So let's break that down. Like, one is, if you don't see yourself reflected in somebody, you obviously aren't gonna go out there and think like, this is a possibility for me. Like, that's a huge barrier, starting with that. And the other thing is how people see you. So me in a hoodie, I'm really cute, but people aren't gonna take me so seriously, so I tend to try to look nicer. And I think that we come from a culture where, women are like, oh, if I don't have the latest, then blah, blah, blah. But the reality is that lean startup requires that you are lean. And so if I have a choice of spending money on a new pair of shoes versus like server space, it's gonna be server space. So you're gonna see me, like, there's some people here, you'll see me in this outfit all the time, because this is my outfit. That's just reality. But I think that having somebody, for example, like you or Paulo, or like anybody here vouch for you makes a big difference, because nobody te va a dar $1,000,000 por tu linda cara. Like, I don't care how cute you are, they're not going to give it to you. And so having somebody vouch for you, which is the huge issue that we're having, is definitely been an issue for folks, because you can have a great product. I've known people who created wonderful things, have users, blah, blah, blah. And the moment comes where like they need to grow, they need to hire people, they need to like be able to get it out there, and they just can't find the investment. And that means that they have to shut down, they have to pivot, they have to do something. But if you're not able to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, which is what this lifestyle is, you have to be comfortable with being constantly uncomfortable, not knowing what's next and trying to figure it out, like, you're not gonna make it. And that's where the success comes from, is really just saying to yourself, I'm just gonna just white knuckle it.
Laura, did you have?
Yeah, I wanted to contrast that with what is going on in Miami, and I think it speaks to what Carlos mentioned earlier. We recently did a diagnostic, it's published in our website, endeavormiami.org, on the entrepreneurial ecosystem here. We surveyed entrepreneurs and stakeholders and asked them what were the opportunities and challenges. And the opportunities are no secret: great quality of life, access to markets, which I think Miami is uniquely positioned for, obviously, Latin America and the US and even Europe. And but the challenges were lack of mentors or role models, and I think that speaks to the being able, looking for help and getting it. Lack of ability to attract talent, especially at senior management levels, and then access to capital, because capital here is still not organized. So, I mean, the good news is that, in our case, Endeavor has proven, as I said, this model where if you select high impact entrepreneurs, these are the ones that don't only have a startup, but are able to scale it. But you help them scale it, and you help them with targeted mentorship, which I think it's the difference of Endeavor, right? It's not just, I'll introduce you to people. It's an organized plan on mentorship and advice. mentorship or advisory boards, depending on the needs of the entrepreneur. And then you support it with other services like education and, in view of lack of talent, you bring top talent, top advisors to help them scale. Then those entrepreneurs, as they are becoming successful, attract talent. Then they produce a successful exit or a successful company. Then they invest in others, right? So I know we're talking a lot about different cultures, but this model has worked around the world. Endeavor is present in 20 countries. And we are the first U.S. affiliate. Actually, it started outside the U.S. and now they're bringing it home. And Sao Paulo is an entrepreneurial hub. Buenos Aires is an entrepreneurial hub. Mexico has actually several cities that are fostering entrepreneurshp. And it hasn't come easy, but it has moved. And this is true also in the Middle East and recently Asia, now Europe. So I do think, you mentioned earlier that culture changes and it starts with a catalyzer. So I think the catalyzer is organized support and the willingness to make it. And I think in the case of Miami specifically, that's the right time. It's the right time right now to make it happen.
What are the hottest areas, and I'll turn it over to some questions in there. What are the hottest areas right now in Silicon Valley? We talked last night about mobile, enterprise software, others. What for people out there who want to, what are some of the hot areas right now?
You go ahead. No.
I mean, I think, mobile's a big deal, but I think the big thing that you're seeing now is the kind of overlap between technology and the real world, where a lot of companies, it kind of started with Uber, where you can tap a button and a car shows up, and then now it's, it's everything. It's a lot of different things. So, I mean, my friend Goggin started a company called Sprig that just closed $10 million in funding from Greylog last week. And Sprig basically delivers fresh chef-cooked meals to your home in like 10 minutes from the time you tap your phone. And they have this amazing, it's kind of proprietary information what they do, but they have this amazing distributed system to where they're able to do that, and stuff is not dry or it's fresh and it's really good.
What's the name?
Sprig, S-P-R-I-G.
Are they live?
Yeah, and mostly San Francisco actually. No, it's great. I use it 3 or 4 times a week. So that's an example, right? So a lot of companies that are kind of like overlapping. So it's kind of like when my dad asked me, like, oh, why can't somebody copy what you're doing? And it took me a while to come up with the answers, like, because you don't know what you're copying. Like, you can see the 20% of what you do that is like shows up in the app and what you do, right? So what Proven is a restaurant hiring tool. So we help restaurants in San Francisco hire and restaurant workers get hired with their smartphones. What you see in the app is like literally 25% of what we do. And then everything else that happens in the background to make sure that stuff is like an amazing experience is you wouldn't even know where to start copying. So and I think that a lot more companies it's starting to look like that. Obviously a lot of people make money with games, but that's really hits driven. And I know absolutely nothing about games, but in terms of companies in the real world, that's something I see.
I mean, it's real life solutions. I think that's where we're going. Like Laundry Locker, I think is a great example with Chris, where essentially it's an app. You put your laundry and they pick it up, they take care of it, you've said what you want, and then they drop it off, and it's super easy. But I think like it's those real life solutions where you're having an issue and technology helps you be able to, deal with that issue. And I think like that's where there's a lot of space. And so it doesn't really matter if it's a website, if it's an app in some ways. And that's when I think it's kind of enterprise, because the reality is like the back end is that Chris is building a network of folks that already are doing dry cleaning all over the country, have never had any software, have been doing the books literally on paper and can't see trends. Like, to be able to give small businesses the ability to forecast, like that's huge. So it doesn't matter whether you have a taqueria or your nanny service or whatever it is, like finding some sort of way to be able to find out where your biggest customers are and to be able to see that data, like that's what's truly going to
But
revolutionize.
also one step further, I mean, a lot of companies are coming up with their own, so
Yeah.
what Chris and Arik are doing is enabling small business, but a lot of people are actually building their entire infrastructure, so Spring actually has kitchens.
Yeah.
It's not like they connect like chefs with the, there's another company called Munchery that does that, but Sprig actually has their own kitchens and they're building stuff. So it's like this notion that like, and there's another company called Rinse that does the whole laundry thing, and like they actually have their own facility. So like a lot of kind of like integrating the entire experience.
Will that expand the group of investors because it's just not necessarily straight tech, will that expand the group of investors, of potential investors? I'm an operating executive at a private equity fund owned by one of the Goya Foods family members, and Unamway, and we invest not really in tech, in media and consumer services and business services, and consumer and business services. So I would think that something like that might expand the
Oh, it sounds like you're interested all of a sudden.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're interested all of a sudden.
But in terms of companies, and after this question I'll turn it over, the hiring of, when you have a market that needs cultural sensitivity, it could be an accelerator that has Latinas as your customer, as your group that you're going after, or even workers proven that, restaurant workers. Do you hire people that are like you in terms of Hispanic and others that have a cultural sensitivity to your target market?
Can I just say something really quick? Pablo said something earlier about, what's happening now with technology. It's really disrupting everybody's industry. I don't care who you are, what you're doing, and I think that's why most of the people are here. They're trying to learn, figure out what's going on. I tell you, my family owned a printing company, had 1,200 employees. It doesn't exist anymore. Printing is dying. So that's where I got into my shifting, and I've shifted multiple times already, and I've already generating revenue. That's what's actually funded, my app, which is something on my third venture now. But it's all about disruption. When they keep talking about that word, stop using that word. It's not the new buzzword anymore. It's happening. It's happening in the real world right now. Your job will not be the same in 5 years, 2 years, 7 years. It will be disrupted. Something will be different, and that's why you're here. You got to learn. I encourage everybody to sit there, pick something that they're passionate about, that they like. I don't care if it's designing a new bottled water. Whatever it is, be passionate about it. Go for it. Stick with it. Do it at night. Have it be your night job. It will become your day job. You just got to stick with it. You can't stop with it.
Good question.
Funny example is smoke detectors and air conditioning. Nest, this company that just got bought up by Google, how many billion? $3 billion by redesigning the air conditioning control room.
Thermostat first, yeah.
Yeah, the thermostat and the smoke detector.
Let's turn it over. Questions, please. Anyone?
Well, comments and questions. I
Sure.
think one is talking about the need for something that helps Latinos and women, which is my thing, and what Douglas and I are doing. Y Combinator, one of the most successful accelerators in the Valley, for example, has just figured out that they want to learn to how sometime maybe get women in, right? So we talk about, it's equal opportunity and that tech is somehow the great equalizer. But we're still human, and we still bring our own biases into this conversation, and we pretend like it really is equal, but it's not. And if it was, we wouldn't be having the conversation, and people would look different when you attend these accelerators and these boards, and these meetings and whatnot. And so when you look at the fact that funding going into women and minorities is, 2 to 3% of total. Is it because of lack of talent? Is it really that we're not interested? Well, we're here, we're saying we are, and it's happening all over. So I think that there is definitely a need, and if it's not obvious, then I think the problem is in the perceiver, not in reality. I think it's definitely there, and that's why there are groups forming and creating space for that talent to be nurtured, and for the redefinition of tech. So you're talking about something really interesting, which is the whole spectrum, right? Like now they own the kitchen, and they're doing the distribution, and they happen to do this online, right? Well, our people have been doing taquerias, and I use my example of a woman makes one dress, she's a seamstress, she makes 500, she's in manufacturing. Like, the way that we call things, the names we give things, definitely make a huge difference in how investors perceive you. But our people don't necessarily have the language or any of that. So for sure, it's important for us to bring that to the peoples, the masses, and being able to link them to investing is a huge thing. So my question to you guys is, from what you have learned, if, say, for example, perhaps Delgado and I were putting together a curriculum, what are 3 things that we must be teaching people who want to come into this space and succeed?
I'm just gonna say one, is understanding how to code.
Okay.
It really is, and it's teaching our kids how to code. Right now, we do nothing about it. All our talent is being robbed from us here in Miami. In most major cities, and even smaller cities, the larger corporations are hiring them away. Apple, the Yahoos, the Microsofts, and then we're just featured now. I don't know, the truth of or the extent of it, but basically saying that they wouldn't hire each other's employees away. Why are they doing that? They're taking our talent away. We got to keep our talent here, cultivate it here, and you can build up a good, what we say, ecosystem, and hopefully people will start to cooperate.
Anyone else have opinions?
Yeah, I just want to comment. Our definition of high impact entrepreneur, and that's the people we're looking for, it's mostly based on soft skills. So it's leadership potential. So you really need to have the drive and passion that Carlos was mentioning before. But the difference is that we're also looking for people that are really committed to the community. So, and that definition of success is not for everyone, right? I mean, some people just want to make money, others want to really get involved. So those are the 2 traits. Obviously, that comes with proven track record, right? But I would think that soft skills, given that the industries and everything is changing so quickly, the ability to adapt and change and still be able to lead, that's key.
So I spoke at a pre-conference, South by Southwest, put on by Mitch Capor, which was about Latino entrepreneurs. And one of the things that Mitch, and he also said this at the LSA event in San Francisco that Jesse put on, that there's a code and there's a way to talk to investors. And there's a way that you have to learn how to write emails. There's a way that you learn how to talk to people, how to make introductions. I still can't believe that anybody makes blind introductions. Like, you should meet this person. You always ask somebody, like, here's what this person wants. Are you interested in the meeting? And there's like all these little things that
Etiquette.
Yeah, like etiquette. And there's each one of them by themselves sounds really small, but in aggregate, there's like 50 or 60 of them. And if you mess up like 15 or more of them, like, you're kind of already dead in the water. So you have to learn the code of how to behave with the people that are stakeholders in the community, whether it be mentors, investors, employees, recruits, press. So there's a way to, and again, it's a contact sport. You got to go do it, and for better or worse, you will make some mistakes. But having somebody guide you through that these things exist, one. And that, pay attention, because if you don't, you're going to end up with mud in your face. That's probably good.
Thank you. That was, and from someone who, you're based in Tampa, right?
I'm based in Tampa.
Yeah, so that wasn't a Silicon Valley question. It was someone who's based in Tampa. One more question. I think we're getting probably kicked out soon, but did anyone have a question? And actually, that's right. Well, until they really
until they kick us out, just bring your guitars.
Someone have a question? Yeah.
You mentioned the challenges of having Latinos break into these entrepreneurial ventures, but also it was mentioned that Silicon Valley doesn't know how to market to Latinos. So I wonder if you can speak a little bit more to that and how people in Silicon Valley can really focus on that.
On the marketing part, or how Latinos can?
Yes, the marketing part.
Well, let me answer the other, and somebody can take the marketing part. At the end of the day, what is entrepreneurship? It's starting a business from nothing. You can sell lemonades from the front door. I started LAM, which is a social media company for Latino professionals out of the Bay Area, soon to go national. And I started it with a domain name, still shared host server with Bluehost, and just a passion of connecting people and getting people together. And not after, it was a hobby of mine for 5 years. About a year and a half ago, I made it an actual business where that was the only thing I did. And I didn't really start looking for funding until about 6-9 months ago. And it was making revenue already. So at the end of the day, you don't really need this focus on, if I don't make it in Silicon Valley, I'm not gonna make a business. It's something that I was afraid of. I was thinking, like, I have to do it this way. I have to go to the top investors. I have to go meet the top entrepreneurs, because if not, I'm going to fail. So in that regards, it's there if you need it, but if you don't get it, and it's so difficult to break into those barriers, go search elsewhere and just do it. Because at the end of the day, you have to just do it.
And I think to your point, I think that's where Miami has a huge opportunity, right? So I think so cities like LA are never going to compete with Silicon Valley. Well, Snapchat, I guess. But that's more of an outlier. But Chicago, LA, like every geography and every community has to find their competitive advantage. And in LA, it's entertainment. I think here in Miami, there is a huge opportunity because of what you were mentioning about the positioning of Miami that's so close to Latin America and so close to to Europe and in that central location. There's a big opportunity for that to be like basically the la beta, the niche that you go into, like the way that you start going and really building a community. Because in San Francisco we don't have a competitive advantage to communicate with Hispanics and on any sort of a scalable or like good. I don't know. I think you guys have a big opportunity in that regard.
Which is why there is that disconnect. That's why I was saying, like, you have these large companies, and we are using their products and they know it, but they don't know how to go about talking to us, and so it becomes this kind of schism that I find myself in this really interesting place of having to educate people on really basic facts. I'm like, you could have looked this up. You didn't need to have me here. The difference between Chicano, Hispanic, and Latino, if you don't know that, I was like, I could tell you, I'm glad to tell you, but the reality is that if you have a marketing person and you're trying to market to us, you should have that person know that, period. And the reality is that most places do not have someone that even has the interest of finding out what the difference are and use the terms interchangeably as if it was all the same thing.
And also, the Silicon Valley is more engineer and product focused than marketing focused. I was a marketing person for a large company for a while, and a lot of it is build the product, engineer the product, and worry about the customer and consumer later on.
I mean, you still have to worry about product. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, when I said that Miami has an opportunity, it doesn't mean like don't worry about product. I mean, you have to build good product. I mean, shitty product is going to be shitty product regardless of what your intentions are, or regardless of how amazing your community is, and all
Or
that.
how much money you have in the bank.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a
You
lot
will
of
burn through that.
Go ahead.
To that, speak to market when it comes to technology. Is it do you should you strive to be the first into the market so nobody else comes in and you overwhelm that market as quickly as possible, or do you prepare it and get it to the point that you're up to par to be able to compete? What is the timing when it comes to technology? It moves so quickly that you want to make sure that you're out there.
I would say neither. I mean, Facebook is a fourth social network.
Yeah.
Google is the 10th search engine, or where's Alta Vista, Lycos, Excite, what happened to that, right? So the only point is that you have to be constantly learning, and there is do what you're doing extraordinarily well, and it's all execution. Ideas are worth absolutely nothing. The ideas are worth the paper they're written on. So you have to go execute and build stuff. Just because there are 7 of other things, that doesn't mean you shouldn't go do it. But if you're gonna go be the 8th, you better have a damn good reason why you're going to be the best one, and that's okay. I mean, it happens all the time. But again, don't build shitty product. And if you build good product and build a good company, that's everything flows from there. And then again, if you overlap that with the competitive advantage of being having that cultural sensitivity, I think that's where magic starts to happen.
And you can't plan for certain of these things, because you could be on a path and not realize that your 4th or 5th competitor has come online. And by the time you realize it and you're ready to launch, you're like, oh wait, because the reality is like certain things you can plan, and that's what I find exciting about working in this space. Is like, I like planning, but I also like improvisation, and you have to be a great improviser, and you have to learn from the mistakes that you've made. So have a great product, but know know that you're gonna make tons of mistakes on the way there,
And never delay launching, sorry.
you know?
No, I was just going to say that sometimes in smaller cities or smaller countries, entrepreneurs are worried about sharing and exposing their company to others because of competitors, and I think that's really blindsided. I mean, I think the more you're exposed to competitors and the more you're able to prove that you can really, you really have the best. You only have the best if you have the best against others, right? Otherwise, you're like
You're by yourself.
So I think that's something really important in a mature entrepreneurial market. People are not afraid to share. People know their competitors, know who they are, and what's their differentiation, right? So in terms of time to market, that's key. I think the sooner the better, and the more repeatable revenue you can get, or customers or views, depending on the industry you are, that's better.
And the raw brutal truth is that if anybody can if I tell you I'm making an app for restaurants to hire people and for restaurant workers to get hired, and if this is being broadcast and live cast everybody all over the world, if anybody out there is able to build that better than I can, I don't deserve to win. It's really as simple as that.
Well, with that one, I think we're out of time. Thank you for listening. Thank you, panel.
Thank you.